Hello and welcome back to another episode of the On the Sideline podcast of Jackson and Kyle. I am joined here, as always, by the man who is also Foxborough forever, Kyle. Kyle, how are you doing?
I'm good. This was an emotional day for me. So obviously, losing Julian Edelman hurt, but he was a great Patriot. We move on. That's what the Patriots do. So it was tough to see him go, though.
Yeah, he's still alive. Just to be clear, the phrasing of that is tough to see him go. He's retired.
I think everybody knew.
I don't know. Maybe someone hasn't paid attention. Yeah. So it's what we will be doing today is we will be spending an hour strictly talking about Julian Edelman. Should be a very fun show, right, Kyle?
Yeah, Hall of Famer Julian Edelman. That's an argument I don't even believe. So don't get all crazy in the chat. I don't even believe it's true. So.
Yes, I love that it exists, though. It's just one of those. But anyways, yeah, no, what we're actually going to do today is we're going to be I have my list of top 5 offensive linemen, top 5 running backs, and top 10 we're going to do pass catchers, which is, it's either a tight end or a wide receiver. Those are going in the same list. So we think it should be fun, and I think we're going to bury the lead a little bit on this show, and we're going to start off with the offensive linemen.
All right, perfect. I'm ready to get into it.
All right, no further ado. Without further ado, let's just get into it. We will start off with number 5. Number 5, I have Tevin Jenkins. Tevin Jenkins out of Oklahoma State. He's a big tackle at 6'6", although his hand length, not that great. He can play left and right tackle, and he has good hands, quick hands, and I would say good feet as well. Maybe not as good as some of these other guys, but still very good. And I think one of the issues of him is he plays in the Big 12 where, basically defense just doesn't exist. So I think that is a concern. But also, he's not necessarily much of a run blocker. However, he can at least make up for it in the pass blocking. So he's someone who I like, and he's definitely someone who, while he's not necessarily the best tackle, he is someone who I feel like is strong enough to play at the NFL level. And I could easily see worst case scenario, he'll probably be a good guard.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Tevin Jenkins. I actually have him 4th on my list.
Okay.
That I say 4th. I think there's a ton of good offensive linemen in this draft, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a really deep, especially tackle. I think it's a really deep offensive tackle class. But this was my Mekhi Becton. I mean, Mekhi Becton was more of like a physical just phenomenon last year. But this is the same argument I had last year. I just like guys who are monsters on the offensive line, and Tevin Jenkins just comes off as a monster. He's going to beat the crap out of you, and he's bigger than you no matter who he goes up against. I'm a huge fan of him, and I think he's a great pick for a guy or a team looking for maybe a second-round offensive tackle that could come in right away.
Yeah, and kind of what I like about some of these tackles too is, for him, who people could argue, well, you could get beat by speed. But worst case scenario, you just move him to a guard, and now you have a great guard.
Yeah, exactly. I think there's a lot of these guys who are versatile. I think there's a lot of guys who can basically play anywhere on the line of scrimmage. So, it's becoming it's still one of the most important positions on the football field is having a good offensive line. Just ask Kansas City in the Super Bowl how that worked out. So I expect a lot of these guys to go pretty early and often, honestly. I know that everyone's talking about the quarterbacks, but there's plenty of good offensive linemen, I think, in this draft, and I think Jenkins is one of them.
Yeah, and speaking of Kansas City, who knows? Maybe if Jenkins falls far enough, I could certainly see Kansas City getting a tackle. But yeah, any final thoughts on Jenkins? We don't have to spend too long on a few of these offensive linemen.
Yeah, no, I think we just about wrapped it up. Like you said, you're getting just this pure power guy, and he's huge, so it's going to be fun to see him in the league.
Yeah, I agree. Now let's go to someone who's a bit of a different tackle here at number 4. I'm going Rashawn Slater. Rashawn Slater is a joy to watch, especially with his speed is really incredible for his size. A little bit small, just the 6'3", 315. That's a little bit small, but he gets up to the second level very well. He's a good run blocker. He also didn't play last year, so there's that. And the one real thing that I think I would say is a bit of a concern is he kind of likes to go with this hug technique of just sort of getting his arms around the side of edge rushers, which I just don't know if that's going to work at the NFL level when you're playing guys who can actually move around, push around a 315-pound guy, whereas in college you kind of have a better chance to do that. But the real thing about Slater gets talked about a ton. I thought this was a fun nugget I found. Apparently it's a big deal. the Chase Young game. He shut down Chase Young in a game, so that's maybe promising that he can shut down a really good NFL edge rusher, and he was able to do it in college.
Well, it wasn't just Chase Young. So this was the interesting part about Slater. So this was from Austin Gale of PFF. In more than 80 pass blocking snaps against Chase Young, Zach Bond, AJ Epineza, and Kenny Willix in 2019, Rashawn Slater allowed 2 pressures overall, one from Bond and one from Epineza. So those are all NFL caliber players that he basically went up toe to toe with and shut him down. So I think he's really impressive. I think, even though he went up against these guys in college and performed really well, I think the length is the one thing I'm slightly concerned about. But like I said, he's gone up against high-level talent in college football that are, legitimate NFL players. And for Chase Young, the defensive rookie of the year, and he beat them. He outplayed them. So you think maybe it's okay in that regard, but you also have to think about it taking a smaller tackle like him.
Yeah, Eli Mullins is the lowest I've seen Slater on any list there. And, one of the things I did was I tried to not really look at too many of what other lists are. So you might see some wild takes here that I don't even realize are wild takes because I'm just trying to focus on this. But I do really like these top 4 guys. And yeah, like you said, the only real concern is just the size. You can't. There's a lot of things you can do at the NFL level to get better. You can't grow. So I guess there's a bit of a concern of just that. Yeah.
I mean, so at the end of the day, though, like I said, he's gone up against good players. So if you're drafting him, you feel pretty good about that, that he's going to come in and be competitive, even, without the length. But yeah, it's just something to think about, especially, tackle position in the NFL is just a whole different animal. So he's going to have to adjust his game or, it's going to look like a bad pick, but I think he's going to be just fine.
Yeah, I agree. I really like these top 4 tackles, especially. I have those. That's kind of my tiers. Is number 1 is in a tier of his own, and honestly, number 2 might be in a tier of his own. But I definitely think that 3 and 4 you could go interchangeable. I think that the tackle position is really important, but I really do feel like Landon Dickerson out of Alabama is just going to be a really good center. And this just feels like a kind of pick that just feels like a can't miss pick where, yes, it's the center, so it's not quite as important. But, he's 6'6", 325 pounds, which is huge for a center. I know he's coming off the injury, but, those things just don't worry me really because it seems like way more often than not they come back and are fine. He maybe doesn't necessarily have the best footwork compared to, other centers, but for his size, it is good because he's 6'6", 300, he's huge for a center, very strong guy, and he still can move. I feel very confident that he's going to be a good player.
Yeah, so the thing with Dickerson is basically what I've heard. Basically what I've heard about Dickerson is overall that they're concerned with the injury history, and that's pretty much it. They're concerned with the injury history. So, if there's not a lot of people finding faults in his game, it's just the injury history, which then you're like, okay. And the other thing is he's center. So he's not going to be taken in the top 15 because of that, because of his position. So if those are your 2 concerns and nothing about how he actually plays the game of football, then yeah, right. I think he's a surefire pick as long as he can stay on the field.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. Do you agree with this being ahead of Slater?
I have Slater too. I'm kind of with a lot of people on this one. I think that, I think that guys like Jenkins could have more upside compared to a guy like, Slater, just because of the length and, just pure versatility that provides. But I think just in terms of refined technique and offensive line ability, I think Slater, there's some people who have him slightly behind or even in the same tier as Penei Sewell. I have him way below Penei Sewell, but I still have him as 2, but that's just because Sewell's insane to me.
Right. Interesting. Okay. So I didn't realize that people is very high. Alex Slater. Where did you have Dickerson?
I had Dickerson 5. I had Jenkins 4, Dickerson 5, and then I had basically 4 offensive tackles and then Dickerson as my 5th guy. So, but yeah, I think he's a phenomenal center, and late first round, early second round, I think someone's going to capitalize on him, and we've seen it with Corey Linsley. You're going to have him for the next 10 years probably. So,
yeah, no, I think this is, again, whoever ends up with Dickerson is going to be very happy. Let's move on to number 2 then. So I'm interested to see what your thoughts are on this guy then. I have Christian Darrisaw at number 2. This feels like a no-brainer to me. I think this guy is incredible. What jumps out at you is just the 34 and a half inch arm length, which is just it's the highest out of any of the guys we'll be talking about. With the 6'5", 313. I would say he can get beat by speed a little bit in the NFL potentially, just because I see him kind of rely on his big arms to some degree. But at the same time, it's like I feel like if he'll maybe get burned a couple of times of that, but then he'll probably come back. And he has great hands that can get him out of trouble. So it's not just the long arms, but his hands are incredible. He's maybe not as athletic as some of these other guys. He's not as athletic as Slater. He's not great at getting to second level, but I just think that what he has that he can do, he's going to be probably a much better pass blocker than I think any other tackle in this draft except for one.
Yeah, and I had him at 3. He's a guy who I think is going to be a stud in the NFL. And like I said, the only thing that I had knocking against him compared to Slater is I think Slater's just so refined right now that I think he's someone that I feel confident in, basically just coming in right away and being really good. And then Darrisaw, I think, is a guy who, like I said, kind of with Jenkins too, is another guy who I think could have a higher upside than Slater overall, but I think it's going to take him a little bit longer to get there, even though I still think he could be pretty good going into day one. I just think Slater just looks like he's going to be a really good pro from the get-go.
Interesting. Yeah, see, my thing about Slater, I guess the difference I kind of have is I feel like Slater is more of what I like about him is going to be effective in the running game, and more what I like about Darrisaw is going to be effective in the passing game, and that's what I value more in a tackle.
That's fair. So I guess a lot of this could be situational too, right? So let's just say, we'll put the hypotheticals out there.
Sure.
Not that either one of these guys are going to last that long, but, if Orlando Brown gets traded, Baltimore, I don't think Slater's going to be there that long. But,
right.
Let's say Orlando Brown gets traded, that's probably the number one tackle in their big board, right? They're probably looking at a guy like Slater as the guy to plug in and play in their system right now.
Yeah, well, I think they still have Sewell ahead, but realistically,
exactly.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, no, it makes that absolutely makes sense, and it could come down to that. All right, well, let's just get into number one. Of course, it's Sewell. I mean, this is even me. I love a good hot take. You can't argue this. What's insane about him, I think, to me, is his tape is some of the best I've ever seen from just a player in general going into college, and he did it at 19 years old. I mean, the fact that he's 6'6", 330 pounds, and moves like he's a wide receiver out there, it's just it's incredible. He's, when you talk about athletic freaks, he's certainly up there, and the sky is the limit for him.
I was trying to think of who to compare him to, and the only thing I could really think of is he's like the mountain from Game of Thrones if he played football his whole life. He moves just so well. He's so huge, and he's the size of a giant offensive tackle that can move like a middle linebacker. It seems like at times his movement is just incredible to me. He's above and beyond number one. And like I said, there's some people who have Slater close to him. I don't really think it's that close. I mean, and I think that I think there's a lot of good offensive linemen in this draft, but Penei Sewell might be the best prospect I've ever seen at the position. He's so good at just about everything. He's so athletic. He's everything you want in an offensive lineman. Yeah,
I mean, I couldn't it's almost like it's a Taylor Lewan like athleticism mixed with like a Trent Brown size. It's just, he's not quite as big as Trent Brown, but he's not that much further away. And again, just the way that you see these guys try to attack him, it's like they know they can't use power to get through him. But it's like, what? Are you going to try and run around this guy? You can't. I mean, he's absolutely, I think, do whatever I don't think he's not going to go in the top 3 pick, but I think any other pick, you can justify drafting him because he's that good at such an important position.
Yeah, and like you said, right now he's 20 years old. So there's still probably room for him to put on some weight here and too, and just be even more dominant. So I guess, do we want to have this Bengals conversation now, or do we want to wait?
Let's wait. Let's wait on that.
Okay, we'll wait. All right. I have a lot of comments on this.
Yeah. All right. So that's the offensive line. Let's get into a couple honorable mentions. Who do we have? I don't have my honorable mentions up. So do you have any honorable mentions you want to mention?
Elijah Vera Tucker was the next guy, and I think he's going to be very good too. But there's just so many offensive linemen in this group. He's another guy who, He's listed at both tackle and guard, and I could see him playing either position depending on where you want him to fit in your line. I think he has that versatility that I think is going to be very good. And Alex Leatherwood's another one I really like, another offensive tackle who's just got great size, excellent power. I think he's going to have a lot going for him too. Those are the two guys that really stuck out in my book. Vera Tucker, I think, in any other draft could be, the top two prospects on the offensive line, just not this one.
Yeah, I have a couple others as well. Jalen Mayfield, who to me, he feels like he could be a good guard. He kind of reminds me of like I have in my notes. He's like a worse Jenkins is kind of how I've described him. And also, Doan, this last name is really confusing. I believe it's Raduns. That's how I heard it. I tried to figure it out. I couldn't find anybody saying it, but that's his name. He's the guy from North Dakota
State. Yep.
State, yeah. Who I've also seen him listed at anywhere from 6'3" to 6'6" in terms of height. So again, not a lot of information about this guy. But his tape is great. The issue is just it's Division I AA. So I just don't know how much to make of that. But he looks good. So he could be potentially a high risk, high reward type guy.
Yeah, I like some of his game. It's going to be interesting to see. The only thing I was concerned about is I think he needs to put on some weight. I've seen him listed under 300 pounds. Yeah. So I think he'll need to put on some weight. And then one more guy, I don't think his tape's fantastic because I think he really struggles with speed at times. But just because of the amount of miles and the amount of games he put in college, I think he's a guy who you could get in like the 4th or 5th round and kind of play early on. That's I'm drawing a blank on his name. Samuel Cosme, I think it is, out of Texas. He's a guy that I think, yeah, like I said, I think he's going to struggle with speed, and I think he's going to have to adjust. But I do think he's a guy you can get in a mid-round pick and play virtually right away just because he has so much experience at the position.
Yeah. Also, Eli Mullen bringing up the Senior Bowl about Raduns, which is also should be mentioned because he did. That's if the concern is can he play against high level talent? Well, he did there, so that's a good point to bring up. But yeah, all right. So that's enough for offensive linemen. I know everyone's probably going to turn the show off now. We only wanted to hear about offensive linemen.
Yeah, exactly. That's the best position in football.
That's right. Well, hey, we'll move on. Let's talk about halfbacks now. Halfbacks are fun. This is something where everyone says don't draft the halfback, but sometimes there's the right time. I'm going to start off with number 5, and this is a weird one. Puka Williams. I like Puka Williams. I think he's interesting. He's someone who he has the fastest 40-yard dash out of any of the halfbacks. He's the Kansas guy. He's listed at 5'10", 170 pounds. So he's not built like a halfback by any means, but he has great acceleration, which pairs with his speed. He can actually run routes well. And one of the things that I was really surprised about is he doesn't go down easy. So despite the weight of, very light, he fights to stay up, which is nice. I'd like to see him gain some weight. He does cut well, though. And obviously, he's a horrible blocker with his size. And he's not a smart blocker either. But the acceleration to speed, he's interesting enough that I would consider drafting just so that way you have someone that most teams don't have, a guy most teams don't have a guy like.
Yeah. So, he's kind of, I think the one thing about Puka, I did not have him in my top 5, but, he is a guy who's interesting. I think the thing you look at is you can find a role from him, I think, very easily. He's a guy who, you may not take him in the first couple rounds, but I do think he's a guy who you can put on special teams to make some plays. He's a guy who can, operate in that Darren Sproles kind of role, which we kind of look for. We almost pigeonhole every small, fast running back into the Darren Sproles. Oh, look, Darren Sproles. But, I think he can fill that role, actually, because, like you said, he does catch the ball pretty well, and he can really move. So he's got that going for him.
Yeah, exactly. And to be honest, I really feel strongly about 4 backs. He was the 5th one. So again, when I'm not really feeling strongly about someone, I'm going to kind of want someone who just, again, like I said, can do something other players can't do. Can do something that when you're playing defense against them, you have to adjust sort of how you play for. And that can be Puka Williams.
Yeah. No, I can agree with that. It'll be interesting to see, how his game evolves going forward. Because I do think, like you said, he's going to have to put on some muscle if he's going to be a running back in the NFL for long term and not basically stuck in that special team sort of role.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked if he goes to receiver either, given his frame. But let's go to number 4. I like this guy, Kenneth Gainwell. He's from Memphis. He has one thing that, again, this probably shouldn't be at the top of my notes, but I think it's interesting, is he has good balance. He seems like the kind of guy where after contact, he finds a way to stay on his feet, and he does always seem to fall forward. And he's kind of just one of those guys where it's maybe a jack of all trades, master of none. But, he cuts well. He has solid acceleration. He's an okay blocker, maybe a bit slow, but there's a lot he does well. And I could definitely see him being a pretty, he's a guy where you get good blocking in front of him, he's going to, get the yards that he's supposed to get.
Yeah, and, I do think that we've kind of seen now this development of running backs out of Memphis that, like you said, they kind of just do everything pretty good. They're not like, you look at a guy like Darrell Henderson with the Rams too. He's not fantastic at any individual role, but he knows how to run between tackles. He knows how to make a cut, and he just is able to do that. And I feel like Gainwell's kind of in that same boat. So yeah, I'm a fan of his as well. I had him at number 5 on my list, and I think he can be a good pro.
All right, cool. Well, let's move on now. Number 3 is the one I really want to talk about, because this is someone who is very fun to watch. He's another unique player. I'm going to try to get this name right. Rhamondre Stevenson. Stevenson is an interesting guy. If you say every short guy gets compared to Darren Sproles, well, I feel like everyone of his stature is going to get compared to Mike Tolbert, because he's 6 feet tall, 247 pounds is what he's listed at. So this is a unique body type, to say the least. He runs a 4.64 40. But you know what? He cuts well. He accelerates well enough. He's a power back. He can run you over. Like, he's just someone who he blocks well. He does the little things well. And he's just someone who I would want on my team. And again, he's someone who I can easily find a role for on honestly most teams. Like, for me, like for Atlanta, for example, this seems like a great pick for them. They already have Mike Davis. Getting another guy who can kind of, you need 2 guys to bring down. I just kind of like this type of player, and I think that people could overlook him due to the fact that he's built like an edge rusher.
Yeah, he's interesting. So my favorite thing was I was doing some background info on a lot of guys, and I looked up on NFL.com, and I came across him. And my favorite thing on NFL.com is he's listed at 5'12" instead of 6 foot. Really random, but I just found it kind of amusing. I think he can be a solid pro, kind of filling that sort of, LeGarrette Blount sort of mentality that I think he has the capability of, that one cut downhill running back. Here's the one thing. If I'm picking between 2 big running backs, I think I'm taking Trey Sermon right now. I think Trey Sermon looked really good at Ohio State, and I think he has a little more speed than Stevenson. So I think if I were picking between the two as kind of that bigger running back, downhill guy, I think I'd take Trey Sermon over him.
Yeah, that's fair as well. It's interesting because I do feel like with these running backs, to me, there's 2, and then there's like 9 other guys. Like, that's kind of how I like the other. I like Stevenson. I think that, again, I guess that's fair enough. Maybe I need to watch more tape on him, but I like. What was I trying to say? I feel like really when it comes down to after 1 and 2, I think you can make a lot of arguments for who should belong at 3.
Yeah, I do think that I don't think it's a great running back class, but I think it's a really deep running back class. I think there's a lot of guys who you can look at as mid-tier talents. But like you said, I do think that there's a top 2 that's pretty clear cut. And yeah, I think that there's a lot of mid-tier talents here that you can look at. Yeah.
All right. So number 2 now, again, no more hot takes here, Travis. So how do you say this? Is it Ateni?
ETN.
ETN?
Yeah.
Like the letter, like ETN.
ETN, yeah.
Okay. Huh. All right. Well, there you go. He's the Clemson guy. He's another one who I feel like one of the comparisons I feel like I can make is he almost reminds me of like a Ronald Jones, if Ronald Jones could do all the little things, where like he's a really good runner, but he also can actually, catch a pass and make a block, which is nice to see. And so he's someone who I feel like when it comes to halfbacks, he seems like, when I watch him, a starting level halfback. He's not someone who is a gadget player, which is a lot of the other guys I have here. He's someone who I feel like can be a 3-down back, someone who, if you need a halfback, you want him on your team.
Yeah, I just, he was really hyped coming out of high school, going to Clemson. And, he was this guy who was well known as this track star, also was a fantastic football player. Every time I watch him, I just think Chris Johnson. And I think he has that sort of capabilities where I think he's really smart and kind of underrated between the tackles. But just because you see him in the open field and that speed's just insane. He just sees a lot of I see a lot of Chris Johnson in his game be able to run between the tackles, run outside, run past you, run around you, does whatever he has to do in the game, because I think he is a complete back despite without giving the frame. I think he's going to be really good.
Did you also have him at 2?
I had him at 1. I did have him
Okay.
at 1.
Interesting.
I get it with the next guy. I understand a lot of it, but I just think as a running back, I think ETN can do everything. I think he can catch really well. I think he can move really well in and out, inside, outside. And I think I have slight concerns about Harris going outside the tackle a little bit more. I know he's got great athleticism overall, but I think that ETN's top end speed, I think, puts it over for me.
Interesting. So yeah, obviously I have Harris at 1. We'll get into this. I don't know. I feel like from what I saw, I like a lot of Harris's east-west movement. And to me, I almost feel like Harris just feels like a Pokemon that's leveled up from ETN. I feel like he's a little bit bigger. He can also block and receive. I think that he has really good vision, really underrated vision. And I think that, again, size is the thing. Size is the skill when it comes to NFL. And him being 4 inches taller and about 15 pounds heavier, like that helps, in my opinion. I think that there's a lot to like about Harris. And we know he can work in a good offense, obviously. So, again, these are 2 good offenses that they were coming from. I think that probably helps make them both look a little better. But at the same time, I think part of why they're good is because, they get good development, and that's what happens. I think that I do, like, as a Tampa Bay fan, I'm really hoping I get one. If we do go halfback, I'm hoping we get one of these 2 guys. And Harris just feels like a complete 3-down back through and through.
So if you had your pick for Tampa Bay's offense, you'd pick Harris, basically, is what you're saying?
Yeah. I wouldn't. I don't think I like ETN a lot too. I wouldn't be mad if we got him, but I would definitely. I think it's. I don't. It's clear to me, in my opinion, that Harris is the better back.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I've seen it go either way, honestly, and I understand both sides. I think Harris looks like the more complete back, but I just feel like the speed can be such a game changer for ETN, and I feel like if he can hold that up for 5 or 6 years, I think he's going to be just another level with that speed and being able to have years like Chris Johnson, where he's nearly at 2,000 yards rushing, and just have that sort of production. I think ETN's a stud, honestly.
Yes. Luke Brown says you won't get either of these at 32. They won't fall that far. Banned for life. Banned for life, Luke.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. 2 running backs in the top 31. That seems extreme nowadays, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think there's a chance. I think there's a chance they both fall, but I think there's a chance they both get selected too. I could see it. I don't know. I'm not a psychic.
Fair enough. So that wraps up the top 5, doesn't it?
Yes. Do you have who else do you want to talk about in the honorable mentions?
So I was surprised he didn't have, so basically, like you said, you don't look at a ton of the lists. The consensus typically, from what I've seen, after 1 and 2 is the 2 Carolina backs, the 2 North Carolina guys, and Javonte Williams and Michael Carter. I'm more of a Michael Carter guy because I love the speed in his game, and I just love that. I feel like he can do a little bit of everything. But there's a lot of Javonte Williams fans out there, and I get it too because he's another guy who's this big, powerful back that can do a lot of things as well. But I had Michael Carter at 3 overall with that speed, and then another guy I was looking at, and I think he could be an interesting one, is Chuba Hubbard. Chuba Hubbard can be an interesting back who's had a ton of production at Oklahoma State. And then the last guy I had on my list that I was looking at is Kylan Hill. Kylan Hill is an interesting one out of Mississippi State, where he was a terrific runner his first 3 years. An air raid offense comes in, and he just adjusts his game and becomes this really good receiving back in an air raid offense. I really like Kylan Hill, and I think, he's going to be like a 5th or 6th round guy, but I think he could be a real steal in the 5th or 6th round.
Interesting. Yeah. So about Javonte Williams, I had in my notes. My real concern about him was blocking. I felt like he was, he's a smart blocker, but he just wasn't. He missed blocks, which is an issue for me. Maybe you can get that better. That is something you can improve on. And for Michael Carter, I think my concern with him is a lot of his cuts in college seem like the kind of cuts that wouldn't work in the NFL. It's a little bit of slower, which they were able to get by guys in college. I'm not sure if it'll work in the NFL. And while he is a good blocker, I just feel like his running ability is nothing special for me. Also, I found my notes for Trey Sherman. I was looking for it earlier and couldn't find it. There's things to like about him. He doesn't go down easy. Again, big guy. I just think, again, he cuts too slowly, which is a little bit, I think, I think that if you're going to be that bigger guy, you have to at least be able to cut. And Now, Stevenson I think is the much better at that.
Okay. Yeah, that's completely fair. I think that they're both going to be interesting prospects, and I think they're going to be taken in similar spots, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So I think the main attraction here, Kyle, is going to be the wide receiver list. This is what everyone has tuned in to see.
Yeah, this should be a good one. Another draft just like last year where there's a ton of pass catchers. And we're seeing it more and more now in the league. We saw the running back kind of become devalued just because there's so many running backs. There is now so many pass catchers in the league. It's going to be interesting to see how it changes the position over the next few years, just because there's so many guys that are available year after year.
Yeah, and I try my best to avoid. So just to be clear, this is wide receivers and tight ends. We're calling it pass catchers, but even if you're not like a blocking tight end, you can still be on the list. That's not what it comes down to. And of course, as much as I try to avoid all this other stuff, I mean, there's 4 guys you just can't avoid hearing about, which is Kyle Pitts, Devonta Smith, Jamar Chase, and Jaylen Waddle. So obviously, I'm well aware of those guys. But what do you say? Let's just get into the list.
Yeah, let's get into it. Number 10 on your list. Who do you got?
Okay, I got again, the name's really difficult. Damie Brown, the guy from North Carolina. In my notes, I spelled North wrong because I'm not good at anything. But yeah, he's an interesting guy. One of my real concerns about him is I feel like he gets too many yards through speed on go routes, and he runs a 4.46. So it's not like he has breakaway speed. I wonder if he'll be able to do that in the NFL. It's not usually through route running. That said, I feel like he could be a really good route runner. He has really good feet, and he is really good at contested catches. Despite the fact that he's only 6'1", 189, I think he's an interesting player. So that's why I have him here at number 10.
Yeah, I think that's really fair. I think we've seen more and more that speed is killing in the NFL, and I think he's a guy with a ton of it. So that could really help his game. Yeah, I mean, the thing is like you said, you think there's capabilities of that route running. I just want to see more of it before I have him in my top 10. That's the only reason why I had him a little lower. I actually had him outside my top 10 in my honorable mentions list, just because I want to see it a little more in the NFL. He's a guy that I think could make me look pretty foolish just because of it, but I just want to see it a little more.
Yeah, well, Nicholas Gill had him at number 5. Nicholas Gill, a huge fan of Brown.
There you go.
Well, so, Brown, if you're watching this, you got Nicholas Gill on your side.
Hey, everyone needs a fan.
Yes. Okay, he's interesting. Yeah, I guess we'll move on now. We'll talk about, I got a tight end here, a blocking tight end for the most part, Brevin Jordan. He's known for his blocking. He kind of is almost a fullback as much as he's a tight end, but he's going to be in this category. Only 6'3", which is definitely short for a tight end. He runs a 4.78 40, which is fine. He's a really good blocker though, especially for his size. Yes, 6'3", but he's also 245. So he's a big guy, good athlete. I think his receiving ability is actually underrated. So he's someone, he's from Miami, out of Miami. He's an interesting player. And it's kind of one of those things where it's like some of these other guys, like he might not necessarily have the highest ceiling, but I can see why a team would go out and draft him. He fits an offense. If you need like a blocking tight end, you just get him and you're pretty much good. Like you know what role it's going to fit in. And in a weird way, because what he doesn't matter, isn't as important as like some of these other receivers, you can almost get more of a known quantity in him, which is what I like.
Yeah, I had him at number 9 as well, and I think you're underrating a little bit of his playmaking too here. I think he has a terrific pass blocking or a terrific blocking tight end, and like you said, I think he's a guy that a lot of people are going to look at and be like, oh, there's a role for him right away because he's going to be able to block. I think he can also catch too. I think he's pretty good coming out in routes as well and making some plays. Now he's not as refined as some of the other tight ends that the one tight end everyone's talking about. He's obviously not that level, but I do think that as a second tight end and blocker, he's going to be able to come out and make some plays too in the pass catching game.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think the one thing I noticed about a lot of his catches, though, a lot of it was in the zone of sort of him just being, other guys running setup routes and him just getting into soft spot and picking up the yards that way.
Yeah, but I think which
is fine too.
Yeah, I think there's plenty of zone defense running the NFL now where he's still going to be able to have that success.
Yeah, and he can help himself out. He helps out blocking the running game. Now you get teams in zone, you can do that. So yeah, a lot to like about him. I'm a fan of his, and we're going to stick with tight ends here. Pat,
Yeah, my
Freiermuth.
God.
Yes.
Freiermuth.
Freiermuth. Oh, what a fun name.
Yeah, he's a stud. I love this guy.
Okay.
This is the, your quintessential, like, just pure tight end. Obviously, he's just all around stud. He can block, he can catch, he can run great routes. He's got fantastic hands, and he's just this long line of Big Ten tight ends who make plays. Big fan of the Freiermuth. It'll be interesting to see where he goes. Is it the second or third round? And I think he could be a steal for some teams. The only question is going to be, tight ends typically take a little bit longer than usual. Is team going to have patience with him to develop fully in his game?
Yeah, his name kind of sounds like a whiskey.
It really does.
Yeah. No, you said he can run. He technically can, although not necessarily quickly. That would be my biggest concern about him.
Yeah, I mean, when I say that, I think he's nimble for his size, but I don't think, he's not going to blow you away like Kyle Pitts. So I think he can move a little bit, but obviously, the strength is his size and physicality overall.
Yeah, a little thing about his size too. So I'm obviously a big fan of him. I put him at number 8. I do feel like for someone who's 6'5", 260, I would have expected him to be, completely moving guys over and mauling guys. He's kind of just like, his blocking isn't necessarily as good as you might expect when you look at his measurables.
That's fair. I just wonder if that's, I don't know. It'll be interesting. I still think he's going to be a good blocker in the NFL. But yeah, that is interesting that you saw that on tape. I do think that he can be a good blocker still.
Okay. Well, also his footwork, incredible. He's someone who's going to get open constantly. He's absolutely going to be, I think, again, worst case scenario, he seems like a really good receiving tight end. Probably will take him that second year tight end rookie thing. Rookie tight ends never do well. Probably taking the second year, but I can easily see him being a Pro Bowl tight end when it's all said and done.
Yeah, no, without a doubt. I think he is going to be very good.
All right. So now I only have one more tight end, and I think you guys know who that tight end is going to be. So we're going with 6 receivers and a tight end left. Number 7. How about Rashad Bateman? He's someone who I don't have a single negative thing to say. I don't really have too many negative things to say about many of these guys left. I think there's 6 really good wide receivers left on the board here. He's 6'2" and still runs a sub 40-yard dash. So that's what I like about him. He can play a 1 or 2. The only thing I could really come up with that's a concern is I'd like to see him get a little bit more moves, a little bit more ways to get himself open. But I really like him as a player. And, out of Minnesota, not a lot to dislike. I have him here at 7.
Yeah, Bateman, I had him. Oh God, I got to count here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I had him at 7th as well. So we're right in line with this one. I think he's interesting because I do think he has fantastic hands. I think my one concern is just seeing a bigger receiver who I think struggles at times to get separation. And I think we've seen more and more. I mean, I'm just getting N'Keal Harry visions. I don't think he's nearly that bad with it. But I think at the same time, I do think there's concerns with these bigger receivers. And if they struggle to get separation in college, how are they going to do it at the NFL level? I still think he's going to figure out ways to do it overall because I think he has really good footwork. But I just saw it at times where he was struggling to get, a little bit of distance between the corners.
Interesting. So yeah, I even have in my notes great footwork. I didn't really see that the way you did. Granted, I didn't watch his entire season, so it's possible I just watched the wrong games. But that's very interesting. I also think that I think every guy in my top 10 gets more separation than N'Keal Harry, and even in my top 20, maybe top 40.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So, all right. Any final thoughts on Bateman?
No, I think that just about covers it. I still think he's going to be a good receiver, and I think it's a deep class. That's just my only concern. It'll be interesting to see going forward.
All right. Well, Kyle, we have not had too many hot takes as of recently. We have not argued too much. Are you ready to change that?
Oh, boy. Who are you going here?
Yes. I hate that I have to do this. I really do. It kills me to do this. I'm going to Heisman winner. I'm going Devonta Smith here at 6.
And you couldn't even get his name right. D-E.
What is it? It's end of E?
I think it's D-E.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
D-E-V-O-N. Unbelievable.
It's a disrespect to the guy who won the Heisman. And listen, I like him as a player. Like, there's a lot of wide receivers I like. I just like 4 wide receivers more than I like him. That's really what it comes down to. Like, it's not like I'm like, oh, well, this is an issue. I even think his size is overblown. I don't think that's a big deal. I just think that it's really hard for me to defend this without talking about the other guys. I just think that there's two wide receivers that aren't getting talked about that as much that I think are better. But he has good acceleration. He's a good route runner, which I really value. 6'1", that's pretty good height. I don't know no one knows his 40 time, it seems, but there's a lot to like. I just think there's guys who are better.
Okay. I have him third on my list. I think that there's two clear cut above him. And I do think that the size is the one concern, obviously, for me. But overall, I think that, this is my CeeDee Lamb argument from last year and why I had CeeDee Lamb as the number one wide receiver. There's just something to guys who get wide open every play. And he just seems wide open all the time. And I just think that that's something that has, I think he has a lot going for him in that regard. And I think he's going to be sure-handed and, just a terrific route runner in the NFL. I have him at third because of that. And I think he's going to be able to, get open on just about anybody.
Yeah. Let me say this. I bet I agree with you on every single positive point you have about Smith. Like that, I really want to be clear on how I guess my concern is just I don't know what he does well enough to really put him into top 5. And again, keep in mind there's a tight end in here too, so it's he's a top 5 receiver. I have him as top 5 receiver.
Yeah, I mean I think that's all fair because I think that there is a really competitive group. I think there's been a lot of talk about the top 4 guys. I think guys 5 and 6 are incredibly underrated, and I'm sure you have them in your list coming up here. But yeah, I mean, I still think that there's just something about him getting wide open all the time and putting up these insane numbers. I know it's college, so it's different, but I just think there's something about him being able to get open every single play.
Yeah, absolutely. And there probably is something to that, right? You get those numbers, you're probably doing something right. I just didn't see it. And I'm not going to give him the nod, get him a higher grade just because that's what other people give him and just because he has good numbers.
Yeah. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see. So I'm curious who you have in front of him because there is a few guys that I think are right behind these guys that are kind of underrated. So I'm curious who you have next.
Yes, I have right next. Justin Jefferson 2, I think is what I'm going to be. I just watch. I can't stop thinking of Justin Jefferson when I watch his tape. This is Terence Marshall. He runs a sub 440 yard dash at 6'3". He can make a contested catch, and his route running is just incredible, which is what reminds me of that Justin Jefferson thing, especially the over the middle routes that you saw Jefferson have so much success with, and obviously the LSU receiver is part of that. He's someone who I do think is severely underrated, and I wouldn't be shocked at all to see him break out and have a very similar Jefferson-esque rookie season.
Yeah, so I had him at 4. I had him just above Waddle on my list.
4 in terms of wide receivers or wide receivers? Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So I had him 4th among pass catchers. I had him just above the next 2 guys I think are going to be on your list. I think he's incredible at just about everything. He's got speed. He's got size. He can go inside. He can go outside. I think he does everything you want really well on a football field from a wide receiver. And I just see him coming in and having a 1,200-yard season next year. I think he's that sure. He feels like a sure thing to me, even if he's the second best receiver from his school right now. He just looks like the real deal to me, and I think he's going to be a long-time pro because he can just do everything really well.
Yeah, there was a game, I forget who it was. I think it was LSU's first loss of the season, where they had no business winning this game because they weren't that good. And Marshall was the only reason they even came close. They ended up coming a yard away from winning it. And the commentator at one point said, find Marshall and throw it to him because he was just the guy keeping them in it. He's a number 1 receiver. I watch him and I just see him as he's the guy who you can run a receiving core around.
Yeah, and he's been basically stuck as a number 2 and number 3 guy his whole career, which is the crazy thing. But yeah, I do think he is fantastic. I think, like I said, he's able to do so much on a football field that I don't see how he misses, honestly. I don't see how you miss on him. And the fact that you can get him in the 2nd round, I think that's going to be a steal, honestly, if he's going to be available then.
Yeah, at least late first. Yeah, I agree. All right, so I find it fun when you talk about the rest of my list because I think it's you saying, oh, I know this guy's probably going to be next. Kyle, the hot takes are just starting.
Oh boy, is it Chase?
It is Chase. Jamar Chase here at 4. Again, I guess I kind of feel a little bit like I've made this comparison with other players before. I feel a little bit like I'm, Ben Wyatt and Jamar Chase is Lil Sebastian. I just don't get it. Everyone else seems to go crazy over him. I'm just a little bit unsure. Like, okay, he can make incredible contested catches. That is true. But part of what concerns me is a lot of what he does comes from making moves in open space and making moves on guys that I just don't know if will work in the NFL that work a lot better in college. He's, 6 feet tall and runs a 4.38 40. So it's not like those things are crazy. He is very explosive and he does have great footwork and hips. Like, listen, I have him as number 4. There's a lot I like about him. But when you're not a very good route runner, it's hard for me to put you in my top 3 right here.
Okay, interesting. I have him at number 2 overall. And I think while it's not the best part of his game, I think he's a good enough route runner. And I think that he's going to be good enough in the league. And, you mentioned the intangibles. He's got great size. He's over 200 pounds, over 6 foot, and can also run a 4.3 almost, or almost run a 4.3 40 or 4.4 40, So I think that just overall the intangibles are there from the guy. And I've just seen him do so much on a football field that I'm just convinced that he's going to be good. We've had this, concern with, early wide receivers and, the track record and success of, top 10 wide receivers isn't always great, but
horrible.
I just think
it's horrible.
Yeah. I mean, it is, but the guy can run. He's got, octopus-like arms with how long they are. And they're just so, he's got these long, he's got this huge wingspan to go with his speed and versatility. I just think he can do everything really well on a football field. And, I feel pretty confident about throwing him the ball. He's going to catch it one way or another.
Want me to list off the top 10 wide receivers selected in the top 10 of the past 9 years? This is who we have. Justin Blackmon, Tavon Austin, Sammy Watkins, Mike Evans, and Amari Cooper. Those are good. Kevin White, Corey Davis, Mike Williams, and John Ross. If those were first round wide receivers, you'd say, kind of a tough class.
Yeah, I mean, it's not great, but I think some of the, you look at guys like Tavon Austin and, John Ross, that's not really the skill set that Chase provides. I would be more inclined to, I think he's a little bit more Sammy Watkins adjacent, but I do think he's better prospect. I'm willing to take a chance on him. Obviously, I do think the one thing that's kind of the misconception, I guess we can bring this up because, I mentioned it earlier. So the Cincinnati Bengals draft pick, I think taking Jamar Chase there is stupid. I really think it's the dumbest thing alive. Why would we've seen teams have great success with great offensive lines and mid-tier receiving talent. Why would you take this wide receiver, even as good of a wide receiver he is, over a guy like Penei Sewell who's going to be on your team for 15 years? I think this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Draft Penei Sewell and, T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd are good enough to be a good receiving core in the NFL. You don't need Jamar Chase on that team. You need Penei Sewell so you don't lose another knee for Joe Burrow.
Yeah, obviously I couldn't agree more. And again, I think that wide receivers, these great pretty much most generational prospect wide receivers don't end up being that good. Like, that's just the reality of the situation. And another fun stat. Okay. In the first round, a wide receiver that's selected in the first round this is the past 10 years, I believe, where there's the 35 that have been selected in the first round, 5 of them became Pro Bowlers. That's 14.3%. In the second round, 10 became Pro Bowlers. That's 22.7% of wide receivers selected in the second round. There's a better chance of you getting a Pro Bowler in the second round. And also, it's 5 for 35 in the third round, too. So you have I made a whole video about this. You have equally as good odds of getting a Pro Bowl wide receiver in the third round than you do in the first round, and a better chance of the second round. So draft Penei Sewell and then get a good wide receiver in the second round.
I'd agree. And they got a good receiver in the second round last year in T. Higgins. So
yeah,
I don't understand this conversation at all. And, I just said Jamar Chase is a stud to me. I had him number 2 on pass catchers on my list. But draft Penei Sewell. I think it's the dumbest thing ever. So that was my rant on that. But I do think he's a stud.
Yeah, this comment made me laugh. I bet Jackson's number 1 pass catcher is Kellen Mond, even though it's impossible. Who told you my list, Luke? That's very good.
Got him. So
yeah.
All right. All right. This is going to be interesting because I think there's a couple guys here who I'm interested in. If you have them on this list, who do you got?
Yes, number 3, Jaylen Waddle. I love Jaylen Waddle. Jaylen Waddle is again. part of this is just what do you value? And I value route running mostly more than anything. That's why I was a big Jerry Jeudy fan and you were a big CeeDee Lamb fan. And I probably missed on CeeDee Lamb, but I still think I hit on Jeudy, except for the fact that he can't catch.
I think he's going to be fine.
Yeah, I do too. And Waddle, again, honestly, he kind of reminds me a lot of Jerry Jeudy. Sometimes he does fail to make the tough catch, but his route running is very good. He's, got great speed. And my only other real concern about him is he sometimes makes too many moves instead of just trying to get as many yards as possible. But he has great footwork. There's a reason why he does it. And also the size, bit of a concern at just 5'10", 183. But, I think that if you can play, you can play. And I think he can play. He's my number 3.
Yeah, and there's this huge misconception I think going around that he's basically Alabama's this year Henry Ruggs. He's nothing like Henry Ruggs just because they're both fast. It's a misconception that I hate. I think he's a terrific receiver overall. I did have him at number 4 just because of the size and can he be that outside kind of receiver that I think Marshall can? I don't really think so, just because I think Marshall has so much more versatility to his game. But I think Waddle is a decent enough route runner. I think he's got terrific speed. He's going to work in special teams. Just a terrific wide receiver overall. And I'm a huge fan of his. I've been a huge fan of his for a few years now. And I'm excited to see him in the NFL and how it translates. Yeah,
part of it too is I just think that I just don't value. I think most people are like, I want a receiver who can play plus. I want a receiver who can play the outside more so than a receiver. Like they don't value slot receivers whatsoever. Whereas I think for me, I almost value slot receivers more, or just guys who can play that position well, because it seems like a lot of what routes today in the NFL are, especially with the innovative coaches. And what I really like is guys who sort of have their receivers kind of run complementary routes as opposed to, hey, just run a fade. I'm going to throw it up to you and hope for the best.
Yeah, and I think he's going to be able to do kind of different things. And I think there's going to be, whoever drafts him overall, I think there's going to be a ton of, drag routes and go routes, because I think those are his 2 best routes overall, because you're putting him in space and it's almost like a Tyreek Hill level cheat code with his speed. But I think there's so much more to his game than people realize overall. And I think he could be a steal for a few teams.
Yeah, especially with, again, it's tough though, because I do kind of feel like as much as I like him, I'm not sure if I take him with a top 10 pick, right? Because again, the same thing. I'd rather just take a guy in the second round who can probably have similar value.
I feel like we're ahead of the curve on this. I feel like we should just start applying to be NFL GMs, honestly.
Yeah.
Because I feel like we're ahead of the curve that you don't need to draft wide receivers in the first round, similar to running backs. I feel like it's becoming very similar. Look at our list here. The number 10 guy on this list might be a top 3 guy 10 years ago for a wide receiver prospect. You know? So I just think that there's so many pass catchers now that I don't think taking him in the top 10 is really that necessary, especially when Penei Sewell and Rashawn Slater are available.
Yeah, there's guys who I'm like, there's guys I have like 3rd round grades on that I'm like, oh yeah, he'll be a good number 2. Like that's where we're at.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, there's guys who aren't going to make this list who I think are going to be studs in the league. So I wouldn't even worry about it overall.
All right, ready for number 2? Do you have a guess on who number 2 is?
It's going to be one of the Moores, I think. I'm going with Elijah Moore. No?
Nope, neither Moore.
Is it actually Kellen Mond?
It is not Kellen Mond. Kadarius Tony.
Okay.
I love this kid. I think that he's, again, people talk, for whatever reason, his frame has now become some big issue. Oh, I don't like how small he is. He's the same height as Chase, and I believe 10 pounds lighter. So he's essentially the same thing. He runs a sub 40-yard dash, and his route running is, he didn't ask him to do it as much as I would have liked in Florida, but it was incredible. And I almost just feel like Kyle Pitts being so good kind of overshadowed him in a lot of ways. I also think Kyle Pitts being so big just made him seem smaller when he's next to him. But trust me, he plays bigger than his size. His shiftiness is insane. I challenge anyone who disagrees with me, just watch some of his highlights, because his highlights are the best highlights in this draft. I guarantee you that if you disagree with me on how good he is, you'll agree with me on his highlights being the best. I think that he's just the kind of guy where I feel like he's a slightly slower Tyreek Hill. Like that's what I see. Maybe there's a bit of a bust factor. I don't know, but I just think that this guy is going to have a really good career, and I think whoever ends up drafting him is going to be very happy.
Interesting. So Tyreek Hill's an interesting comp, because I do think there is some shades to his game of Tyreek Hill. I think he is a big play machine, and like you said, he probably has the best highlight video of anybody in college, of the NFL draft prospects. Maybe Najee Harris too, but that's they're pretty close 1A, 1B in my opinion. I think Tony is terrific. Like I said, big play machine. I think the one thing that separates Hill between a lot of other guys who have a lot of speed and shiftiness in their game is I think he's a vastly underrated route runner. I think Hill's actually a fantastic route runner.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Tony has some steps that he needs to take to be a better route runner. I think he's a little slow out of cuts, in my opinion. I think
that's insane. I don't know what I haven't watched. I think I strongly disagree. I think that he cuts better than any receiver in this draft.
I mean, I think a straight line speed, I think he's fantastic, obviously.
No,
but
I'm saying I think he cuts better. I think his shiftiness and his cuts are better than any receiver in this draft. That's why I have him here.
Interesting. Well, I still think he needs to improve some of his route running. It'll be interesting to see because I think, like you said, he could be the steal of the draft if he improves a lot of that. I think if he improves some of his route running, I think he's a surefire thing because of that speed. But I just think I would take a more complete product like a Waddle or Terence Marshall right now over him.
I guess I just disagree with the premise. I don't think that he's incomplete. I don't think that I think that the only real issue I guess I had is just that he plays for, he didn't get the ball as much and he was open. You watch the tape, he's open on plays. I don't know. When I watch him, I don't see a guy who needs to improve route running. I see a guy who they don't seem to ask him to run routes too often, to have him run too many go routes when that's not necessarily what he's the best at. So I think that he could have been used better, but I don't think that I don't think that it's a fault of him.
Yeah. I mean, it'll be interesting because I do think that, I do think some of Dan Mullen's offense is pretty basic as far as college football goes. And it makes it easier on the quarterbacks why his quarterbacks put up such good numbers all the time. Mm-hmm. So I think overall, maybe with a more complex offense, he'll prove it more, but I do want to see it a little more out of him. I do have him on my list. I do think his playmaking is insane. There's a couple guys who I've seen more out of as more complete products that I would have probably above him.
Yeah, there may be some truth to that. I just think that I'm looking for, I think people can probably tell by the way I do this. What I value is just different than I think what other people value. And I do that intentionally because, Nicholas Gill said very well about how I put out the video about how wide receiver draft rankings are always failing. So it's good to go a different route. And I think that's true. I think you should try to find different things than what other people are looking for or just don't draft the top guys. Either one.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting. So, I mean, I think he could be a fantastic player, like I said. But I think some of the things that we've looked at too, with you had your list of guys who haven't really panned out from the first round picks. You look at guys like John Ross and Tavon Austin. There are a lot of these speed guys that get taken kind of early, and I know there's been kind of this trend is the 40-yard dash almost overrated at this point. While I think speed's still important, is that something you're concerned about overall? Where is his speed really going to be as effective in the NFL?
I'm not drafting him for his speed. I'm drafting him for his shiftiness. I'm drafting him for his footwork and his hips. That's what I'm drafting him for.
Okay, it'll be interesting. Yeah. So you got Florida guys back to back, then I'm assuming, right?
Unless what if it would be quite the twist if I did not end up doing that. Also about the 40-yard dash. So I have a video coming out tomorrow. I'll spoil a little bit of it for those of you who are going to watch that. But about the 40-yard dash thing, interestingly enough, it does get better the lower your 40-yard dash goes in terms of first-round prospects. So the lower your 40-yard dash goes, the more likely you are to succeed, except when you get to sub 440. Then it actually goes the other way, and you're more likely to be worse, which makes sense. So basically, if you get drafted in the first round because of your 40, you're probably not going to be very good. But other than that, it actually is a pretty good indicator. Yeah,
I think that's completely fair. So it'll be interesting to see overall. I think Tony is a fantastic prospect, and I think he is going to be – I still think he's going to be a big playing machine in the NFL. I think there's just more refined products out there.
Yeah, fair enough. Again, I realize that I'm out here on a limb. You can, if you want to angry tweet at me, my Twitter handle, by Kyle Grondin.
Yeah. Send all your tweets complaining about Jackson to me. I'll read them all off.
Yes. I didn't even have no anticipation for putting out number one. Kyle Pitts. All right. So podcast over. Thanks to everyone for this guy's insane. Again, it's kind of, no matter how much hot takes I want to give, it's hard to really give a hot take with Kyle Pitts on the board. I think he's an underrated blocker. I think he can block. I think I actually think that Kyle Pitts is an underrated prospect. I think he's even better than he's getting credit for. The only con I really have in his game is he maybe relies on his physicality a bit too much. I could see in the NFL that being a bit of an issue just because he'll have to get used to it. But then he'll just, utilize his great speed and great footwork and get around people that way. And obviously being 6'6", there's no such thing as a sure thing when it comes to prospects. People are already comparing him to like Hall of Famers. You don't know if that's going to happen, but I mean, as far as you can feel good about a tight end, you can feel great about Pitts. Yeah,
I'm going to overreact. I'm going to say this guy's an all-pro. I'm ready to bet it right now.
Okay.
Honestly, I think this guy, if I don't have, Mel Kiper's big board, but if I made a big board, my number one would be Kyle Pitts and my number two would be Penei Sewell. I think those are the two sure things of this draft. I feel like both of them are going to be complete studs. I think he does everything you want at the tight end position. I think he does it really well. His speed's insane. 84-inch wingspan is just ridiculous. He makes the most difficult catches of any player in this draft class, I think. He makes such high degree of difficulty catches. I'm
not sure if he's better than Chase. Chase is really good at that too.
He is good at that. But I just think, the way this Florida offense was almost constructed is, hey, Trask, when in doubt, throw it to Pitts and we'll figure it out. And, I think that's kind of why Trask is a little overrated in this class, honestly. I just think he is so he's an athletic specimen. And I don't like to say the word freak a whole lot when it comes to these guys, but he's a freak. I mean, he really is, just in the true essence of the word. He's the new, he's the next evolution of this tight end revolution in NFL football. I'm willing to bet that this guy's going to be an all-pro in the next 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, I would not take you up on that bet. Like, I think that's more likely than that not happening. I guess my thing is, like, I just get annoyed when people act like anyone in the draft is a sure thing. Like, even like the most surefire prospects, like let's say a Cadarius Tony, even they could potentially bust, although highly unlikely.
Yeah. So I actually heard this as a joke, and I find it funny, so I'm going to repeat it. So imagine if San Francisco traded up to take Kyle Pitts.
Yeah,
and
right.
It's George Kittle and Kyle Pitts. I mean, that's over, God. Right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's nuts, though. I mean, honestly, I can't find any fault in his game. I'm willing to bet that this guy's going to be insane.
Yeah, I mean, he's really good. Delusional Patriots fans is 6'6", 444, which, I mean, that is true. The 444 time at 6'6", like, how is that possible?
Yeah. So where would you take him? Like,
actually, where would I take him? So I think that I wouldn't hate it if Atlanta took him at 4.
I wouldn't either. Yeah. I honestly think they should at this point. I think him and Julio Jones, like, how do you cover that? How do you cover? You would need like 6'5" cornerbacks.
Yeah, and then you need your third corner on Calvin Ridley. Have fun.
Yeah, exactly. So I could see him going 4. And honestly, we've talked about the Bengals where I think taking Chase is ridiculous. I don't think taking Kyle Pitts is as ridiculous because I think he adds a lot more to it. I still would take Penei Sewell just because of the fit and what they need on that team. But I think Pitts is more justified than Chase, in my opinion.
Let me ask you a question. So let's say first 4 picks end up being all quarterbacks. We'll say Atlanta trades back to Denver. They select the quarterback. So now you're Cincinnati. Who do you select, Kyle Pitts or Sewell?
Like I said, I think Pitts is the best player in this class, but I would still take Sewell. Sewell's my number 2 guy. I think he's a perfect fit for their team. I think he just looks like he's going to be a 15-year pro, and not only that, he's going to be a multi-time Pro Bowler. I mean, you just said you don't want to over-exaggerate. I'm over-exaggerating on these two. I feel so confident in both of these guys being awesome. I don't see how they miss. I think you can even, poke holes in some of the games of guys like some of the quarterbacks that are talked about 1 through 4. I don't think there's any holes to poke in either of these guys, honestly.
You can't poke holes. I think that, I agree. I'm not saying you can't overreact to the prospect value. Like, I think that Sewell's probably the best prospect I've ever seen. I really think that. I think that I've never seen a prospect quite as good as him. I'm just saying we can't put too high. Even the best prospect I've ever seen still has a chance to, be a bust.
Yeah. No, that's fair. So it'll be interesting to see. But I mean, I think he's without a doubt number 1 on my board.
Yeah, same for me. This was once I started watching his tape, I'm like, oh, okay. Well, this makes it like there's no like it was just incredible. I was blown away by watching him. Let's get some honorable mentions about this. So a couple of guys who I'll say a couple. You'll probably say a couple, and we can go back and forth a little bit. My number 9 wide receiver, who was number 11 on this, Amir Smith-Marset, who I remember putting in my notes. He feels like he would end up being a Pittsburgh Steeler that ends up like getting 1,000-yard season. Like that just like feels like he's the kind of guy who could do that. He's someone who I think look out for. He's like a more of a third day type player. He's the guy who I was thinking of when I said like I have a third round grade on him, but I also think he could be like a legit number 2 receiver. Also, Seth Williams, I think is interesting. I think he seems like kind of he's a bit of I feel like maybe a low ceiling but high floor type guy. So I got a couple of those. Do you have any more you want to mention or talk about those guys?
Rondale Moore, I think he can do a lot on the field, and I thought, he was, the playmaker for what I thought was a bad Purdue offense overall. And I think that he's so skilled with the ball. I think, I don't know what his ceiling is going to be, but I think he's going to find a way to be effective in the NFL. I just think that with his speed, route running, and just kind of refined game and proving it against a good conference too in college football, I think he's going to find a way to be pretty good in the NFL. Even if it's not like a superstar role. And, I still like Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think he's going to be an interesting guy to watch grow out of USC. I think he still has to refine his technique a little bit, but I think he has some pretty good hands, and I really like his game.
Yeah, I like Brown's definitely St. Brown's definitely the kind of guy who can make tough catches. But yeah, it just again, not to freak out over a 40-yard dash, but the 4.51, it's not the best. And I feel like you need to have good enough route running, I think, to make up for that, which I don't really know if he does. He almost reminds me a bit of a N'Keal Harry type.
He could be, but I think he has better hands than Harry personally.
Yeah, he does. As for Rondale Moore, again, I was blown away to see his 40 time because I did not think he looked that fast on film whatsoever. So that's a bit concerning. And I feel like he also relies on guys making guys miss too much and sort of running through tackles, which they're the kind of moves that I just don't know if will work in the NFL. So that's why I left him off the list. But he could be a big boom or bust type of guy.
Yeah. Like I said, I just think he's going to find a way to be good in the NFL. That's my only thing is, I wouldn't take him in like the first 2 or 3 rounds. But if you have him available there, you probably say, I'll take a chance on this guy who's proven that he can be productive.
Yeah. What about the other Moore, Elijah Moore?
I think he has a pretty solid game, but he's one of those guys that doesn't really blow me away, I think, in any particular category. And I think that's kind of why I had him a little below is, I think a lot of these guys have a top end skill. I'm not sure what I love about his top end skill.
Yeah, it seems like, he does some things well. I think not the best first step, but he gets off cleanly, he's fine. And he is a solid route runner. But like, I just feel like someone's going to overdraft him due to the 4.35 40-yard dash, which I think is silly. Like, I'd rather get a 4.4 guy who can, play wide receiver better.
Yeah, and not to mention, we've also seen this. We've seen this story before of Ole Miss wide receivers, looking better outside of Ole Miss and then when they were at Ole Miss and, panning out in the NFL. So that could be an interesting variable to it too. And I do think he's going to be taken high because of it. But I do think that right now that you have your top 4 and then the next 2 guys people talk about are Elijah Moore and Terence Marshall and then Cadarius Tony as well. I would take Marshall over Moore. I think Marshall looks like the more complete player without a doubt. I don't think it's really close, honestly.
Yeah, I agree with you. There's also Dwayne Eskridge, who I think is interesting. Good first step, cuts well, plays good special teams. And, really my only issue with him is kind of he'll be 25 when he's playing in the NFL.
Yeah. Yeah, that's certainly that's old.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And then let's see. A couple more guys that wanted to talk about. You have Shee Smith, who runs a 4.33 40, so he has that speed and he can make a tough catch, but I just don't think he has the best hands. And I just feel like I'd like to see him improve his route running and route running. He has solid footwork. I just like to see him improve the route running. So he's interesting. I have him on my honorable mentions list as well.
How about Tutu Atwell? Just too gadgety?
Let me. Jeez, there's so many receivers to keep track of.
Yeah.
I think he's on my list of guys that bored me. List where I don't know. At a certain point, it's like, yeah, whatever. I knew he wasn't going to make my top 10, so I just kind of stopped.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing with him is he looks like Tavon Austin, honestly. He's got very similar size, and while I think he's got incredible speed, and I think he actually has pretty good route running ability. It's just so hard at that size to be so effective in the NFL. I do think he's a guy that interests me, but I just it'd be a 6th or 7th round pick, honestly.
Gotcha. And then there's also, like an Anthony Schwartz, who I feel would you draft him in like a 5th round or something? Just hopefully he can be he's the guy who, he ran the fastest 40. He ran a 4.26. Would you draft him just in like a same like Scotty Miller type of just hope that he can be someone who can get past the defense and who cares what else they can do?
Yeah. I mean, why not? I think you do have to take flyers on that kind of production. So, and then, next week we're going to have our top 10 white wide receivers in the prospect rankings.
Okay.
But another guy,
I didn't get that memo. I don't think.
No, I'm just kidding. But one guy, he's not white, but one guy that I also interests me just because it's my school and another good 40 time too, Jacob Harris at a UCF. I think he's really big. He's got some pretty good speed to him. He needs to refine a lot of his game, but I do think he has some intangibles that can be interesting to see.
Interesting. All right. Well, any final honorable mentions? I think we covered it.
Yeah, I mean, we just named like 30 guys. So as you can see, there is a lot of pass catchers in this draft.
Yeah, we just want to get our bases covered, so that way when there's someone who breaks out, we can say, "Oh, we said this good thing about him."
Yeah, exactly. We got everyone covered, literally.
Yeah. No, what we should do is we should create our next podcast. We should just go back and forth and just list every like position and say, "I think this guy's going to be the best. I think this guy's going to be the best," and then we'll just like edit out the rest, so that way it seems like we called it.
Yeah. We'll just have these little snippets that we're actually geniuses. So I'm in.
Yes. All right. Seems like a good plan. Okay. Yeah. So that's our show. Next week we will be doing the same thing, but with defensive players.
Yeah. So we're going to be back on Sunday night next week doing defense. We haven't really discussed how we're going to do it. Are we going to do top 10 defensive linemen, linebackers, and safeties, or secondary, or?
Yeah, I was kind of thinking we would just do top 5 of each 3 positions. So maybe we could do that. Or I'm not sure if that might be a bit quick. So maybe we could do top 5 safeties and top 5 corners, and then do top 5 defensive. Or maybe how about this? Let's do top 5. Let's do top 10 defensive linemen, and then 5 linebackers, 5 secondary players.
All right, sounds good to me. So.
Okay, cool. And what about kickers? Eli Mullen wants to know.
I got nothing for you, Eli. I'm sorry.
Yes, sorry. Maybe next year. All right, that's our show. Everyone, thanks for watching. Kyle, before we end the show, let them know where they can find you.
Yeah, once again, show updates at Twitter at On The Sideline JK. That's at On The Sideline JK. Make sure to follow him at Jackson Kruger and subscribe below to his YouTube channel that is doing fantastic work. And then follow me at Twitter at @ByKyleGronin. That's ByKyleGrondin. On Twitter at @ByKyleGronin. Make sure to tune in for that.
Yes. All right. I'm just going to leave this on here as the show ends. Thanks to everybody again. We appreciate it. And until next time, have a good one.
Peace.